Our apartment was on the little square across the road from the Hilton. A steady flow of people from early morning to late evening passed our entrance door. On the square itself there was a fountain, the trickling sounds of which went on through the night, and a big octagonal fast food stand that blared out soulful pop and 80s hits to its customers. The benches a bit farther away were occupied by homeless people. Ours was the top apartment on the 6th floor, with a balcony running its whole width at the front. I took my jacket and shoes off and went inside. Heidi and Vanya were snuggled up close in one chair, staring at the TV. Jon, standing in the middle of the floor in his diaper with a toy car in his hands, looked up at me. Linda was sitting on the sofa reading the newspaper. Cuddly toys lay thrown about the entire room, as well as a number of books and plastic toys. "How are we doing, girls?" I asked. No reaction. Their little blonde heads were motionless as they stared at the TV. "Are you hungry?" Linda asked. "There's some leftovers out there." And went out into the kitchen. The dishes were still on the table, the girls' plates almost untouched. They hardly ever ate at dinner, never had. To begin with, Linda and I had argued about it. I wanted discipline when it came to meals, and felt they should sit at the table until they'd eaten up, whereas Linda held the opposite opinion, that when it came to food, everything should be as free as possible, with no compulsion. The first year we lived in Malmö, I talked about it with one of the other dads from the nursery. How did they cope at mealtimes? They never had any trouble at all. She always sat nicely at the table and cleaned her plate. How on earth did they manage that? I wanted to know. "She knows she has no choice," he said. "How does she know that?" "We broke her will," he said. "She sits there until she's finished. It doesn't matter how long it takes." Did he realize what he was telling me about himself? I wondered. "It's the same whenever she throws a tantrum," he went on. "I've noticed Vanya gives you a bit of trouble every now and again." That I had gauged him, or rather both parents, to be alternative, meaning soft. So the fact that such uncompromisingly Victorian parenting methods should suddenly be revealed in their case came as a surprise to me. Once Vanya had been at their place. It was her first ever sleepover. I went to pick her up the next day. They said everything had gone fine. "There had been a minor episode," he said. "But we sorted it out, no trouble, didn't we, Vanya?" "What happened?" I asked. "Well, she asked for more dinner, but then after we'd given her some, she wouldn't eat it. So she had to sit there until she did." I stared at him. Was he mad? No, he was already rummaging around to find her socks for me, and I said nothing, even though I was furious. Who did he think he was? Linda was enraged when I told her what had happened. By then I had changed my mind about it. It wasn't that bad. Besides, it was probably good for her to see that different people had different rules. "That's not the point," Linda said. "They're criticizing us, aren't they? How dare they? Who do they think they are? You should hear how smug she is. You wouldn't believe it." This was how it was having children. You found yourself thrown together with complete strangers. People who were sometimes impossible to understand. The air outside on the square had a nip about it, and I zipped up my jacket before going over toward the Internet Cafe a bit farther up the street on the other side of the road. There was a lot going on at the moment. The day was approaching when I would have to give up the manuscript to Linda, and she would begin to read what I had written about our life together. It was one thing having an idea what her husband was thinking in his darkest moods, but quite another to read about it in a novel. And our life together was what the novel was all about. I spent half an hour talking to Geir Angell on the phone. Ate a packet of cold fish cakes for lunch, made a fresh pot of coffee. And then when I came back in from the balcony, there was an email from Gunhard. The subject line said, "Verbal rape." And I lit a cigarette and stared out across the rooftops. My heart was beating so fast it felt like it was trying to get out. Verbal rape. It was as if he were standing there screaming. It was my mother who was behind the novel, he wrote. She hated the Knausgaards, and always had. For all those years she had indoctrinated me with her hatred, brainwashed me, until eventually I had lost contact with the real world completely and written this despicable, immoral, and self-centered shambles of a book, so I could get back at the family and line my pockets. Dad never got what he needed from her, which was to say love, intimacy, companionship, warmth. Gunnar had realized this even at the age of 12. But to his brother, Dad, such an insight had come all too late. I took the phone with me out onto the balcony and called Geir. "Hello, Gunnar speaking," he said. "Is that my despicable, friendless nephew? How dare you call this number?" I couldn't stop laughing. I bet you couldn't. "Forget about him. He's angry with you." It's not hard to understand. But that's all it is. It's not like you've done anything wrong. And he's going to take me to court. I don't doubt him for a second. But that'll be excellent. You should hope he does. It'd be the stupidest thing he could do. You'll be rolling in money. Everyone will be wanting your books if it comes to a court case. This is literary history in the making. And you'll be a millionaire. There's no better scenario. I can think of a couple. You've written about your own father. That's your prerogative. Your fucking inheritance. That's what he left you. No one can deny you that. The reason I had written about my father's death and the dreadful days that followed. When Yngve, in a car full of empty bottles, had turned to look at me and said that if I ever wrote about this, no one would believe me. The only thing I knew was that the sight that met Yngve and me when we entered the house back then had been dreadful. Gunnar was saying it was untrue that the place had been littered with bottles from the front door and all the way up the staircase. That in the 2 days before we arrived he'd cleaned and neatened the place up, and that only Dad's room and some of the heavier items had been left. The way I remembered it, there had been empties all the way up the staircase, from the living room to the top floor. There were shopping bags of them dumped underneath and on top of the piano, and the kitchen had been crammed too. It was a novel about him and me. It was a novel about a father and a son. In a diary we found among his things after he died, he wrote about the solitary individual. He wrote that he could tell the solitary individual apart from others. And it would seem he counted himself as one. Six years previously, he had traveled to Baghdad and stayed there before, during, and after the American invasion of Iraq. His intention was to write a book about war, and he had entered the country as a human shield. Nearly everyone I know has a father who failed them in some way. And everyone tries to compensate for that failure in the way they relate to their own children. Even if you succeed, like my dad did, and I'd say he was an ideal father, the ideal doesn't necessarily get passed down. So you're a better dad than your own father. Well, I'll be a worse one than mine. And when it gets to Niall's turn, he'll be compensating for that in the way he relates to his own kids, who for their part are going to be just as hopeless as me, their granddad. The ideal doesn't get inherited. That's the point. Having a decent dad doesn't help in the slightest. Of course it does. It's a good thing in itself. But what do we get out of a harmonious childhood? I know loads of people whose childhood was fantastic, but where did it get them? What have they done? I look at my kids, and the only thing I want for them is to be happy. To have as good a life as possible. Well, all I can say is I hope you fail. The spring Linda and I got together, we went out a couple of times with Geir and Christine. It was when we were still obsessed with each other, kissing and touching, unable to keep our hands off each other. I had become something else, a creature floating in the sky, high above the world and everything in it. I was the sky man, she was the sky woman, and together we were going to have a sky baby. But then we came back down. The sky life stopped, and something else began. We started arguing, and the walls of her apartment, into which I had moved, closed in on me. Our arguing turned her into my father. I was afraid of the loudness of her voice, her sudden fits of anger. One time Geir came over to her apartment. We were going out. He walked around the place, shamelessly examining everything in it, as if he wanted to tell her he could read her like an open book. Whenever I got an engagement somewhere, Linda would say, "What about me? Have you thought about me?" I would turn things down and back out of things because she couldn't be on her own, and when the children came along it became 10 times worse. Like the 2 hours I spent playing football every Sunday. When Linda wasn't feeling good, she would be angry at me before I left. I told her it was the only thing I did outside the house. I never went out at night, never went to the cinema, never met up with any friends. But she never did anything on her own, she said. That was a luxury denied to her, to be able to just go out whenever she felt like it. Feel free, I would say. You can go away 3 days a week if you want. I can look after the kids on my own. It's no problem. I can do that. To which she might say then it was easier for me to have the kids. But they demanded less of me than of her. Does that mean they should be with me 70% of the time and you 30%, so as to even things out? Well, that's fine with me. Fine for you, maybe, she might say then, but not for them. One such Sunday, after I'd been playing football for 2 hours in the pouring rain, and I got on my bike to cycle back, already in low spirits at the prospect of going home, I was suddenly struck by the liberating realization that Linda wasn't there. Her mother was with us that weekend, and that fact, the relief I felt at being able to go home to her mother and not to her, was the same as admitting that we had come to the end of the road. She was a writer and a trained radio documentarist. Her reacting the way she did to the look Geir gave me on this particular day in August 2009 had to do with all of this. Geir's look said, "I see what you mean, Karl Ove. She's relating Gunnar's threats to herself." It is not some accidental detail that Dad moved into his mother's house before he died. He died a son. He had abrogated his responsibility as a father. He became a father at 20, and must have suppressed all his urges to break with propriety, combated all the yearnings and aspirations, because that aggression, that anger and frustration he had, which characterized my whole childhood, could only exist in someone who didn't want to be there. Both Linda and I were the children of sons, and we had experienced first-hand fathers without limits. She offended my mother. She offended my brother. And she offended my close friends. And she could be so unpleasant that I was torn apart with conflicts of loyalty. But what made the whole thing so crazy was that her mental picture of what was happening was the exact opposite of reality. She often stayed in bed and could lie there for days on end. She constantly had pains somewhere. I did all the food shopping, trudged home with all 3 children, and 4 or 5 shopping bags filled to the brim. I couldn't stand it. But I had to, if I wanted to keep everything in one piece. I woke up unhappy, spent the day unhappy, and went to bed unhappy. If only I could have an hour. Such was the situation when some days after we had returned from Prague, this topsy-turvy autumn, I gave Linda the manuscript. When I wrote it, I had nothing to lose. When she read it now, suddenly I had everything to lose. I tried to subdue them by telling Linda there were a lot of terrible parts in the novel and she would be angry, but my intentions were not bad. She just smiled. She answered at once, I could hear from her voice that she was sad. She said she was on the train and had started reading. "But it won't get any worse than this, will it?" she asked. "Yes," I said, "it will." The children clung to her as she took off her shoes and jacket and put the little suitcase by the wall. I set the table. We ate. We said nothing to each other. Afterwards, we sat in the living room to watch children's TV with them. After a while, she looked at me and said in English, "The knife." "In the novel," she said. "What are you talking about, Mommy?" Vanya asked. "I'm just chatting with Daddy." "What do you mean?" I said. "The one Geir gave you," she said. "No one will understand why it's in the book if it isn't used." When the TV program was over, she read to the children. I sat on the balcony, my soul chilled. Then she came in with a big cup in one hand and sat down on the sofa on the other side of the table from me. She looked straight at me. I felt sick. "What did you mean about the knife?" "He gave it to you so you could stab me. He wanted to get rid of me. Don't you understand? He's a vampire. He hasn't got a life of his own. He lives through you. Do you think him giving you a knife was chance?" "It was his prized possession." "This isn't about Geir," I said. "This is about you and me." "With him looking over your shoulder?" The most radical difference in his lifestyle before and after he left our family, besides his alcohol consumption, was social contact. All the new people who suddenly came into his life. On weekends he drank from the time he got up until he went to bed. During the week he managed to keep more of a grip to begin with, refraining from alcohol in the mornings. Gradually it became harder and harder to resist, and eventually he gave in to it completely. And no longer cared. Dad wrote in his diary that he had been beaten as a child. And now he was a father who beat his own children. More than any other, such a statement stands as an argument against the idea that humans are rational beings. I think it's the description of the space it took place in that's causing the offense. The fact that your door's being opened and everyone can look in. That can't explain why he's so angry, said Linda. There must be something else besides. Why does he think your mother is behind it all? Christina asked. My guess is they didn't want Dad to marry her, that they didn't think she was good enough or right for him. At any rate, they didn't go to their wedding. That's a statement. But he was still a child when Mom and Dad got together. 10 years old, something like that. His big brother got married and moved away. That must be quite an upheaval for a boy that age. Who was she to him? Presumably the same person she was to his parents. I opened the fridge door, held the cold, slim beer bottle, and took a couple of long swigs before going back to the balcony. "Do you remember when we saw each other for the first time?" I said, sitting down. "What would you have thought if you'd known you were going to marry and have 3 children with him?" I remember going into the common room, the one with the big fireplace. Everyone was there, and I just had to leave. I couldn't take being in the same room as you. Or rather, I couldn't stand seeing you talking to others and having a life beyond me. "I'm thinking about everything I've lost," she said. "Better to think about everything you've gained." "There's so much contempt in you," she said. "I know you look down on me." "Look down on you? I certainly do not." "Yes, you do. You think I do too little. I whine all the time." "No, that's not true." "But you're right that sometimes I think you don't do enough." "You never tell me I'm beautiful anymore." "Actually, I don't mean anything to you. I'm just someone you live with who happens to be the mother of your children. My friends can't understand how I manage to achieve all I do. 2 children and pregnant with a 3rd. I don't think you have any idea how much that really is." "Your friends don't know anything. You shouldn't listen to them. They're just trying to comfort you." In Linda, something weighed her down and lifted her up. She had to fight it, because when it weighed her down, everything was black and without hope. And when it lifted her up, it was bright and hopeful. When I met her for the first time, she was on her way up. And at that time, it didn't stop, it didn't turn. Just carried on and on. There were no limits. She didn't sleep anymore. The day was endless. Finally, a girlfriend found her in her apartment, hunched up on a table, mumbling numbers. Linda has stars inside her, and when they shine, she shines. But when they don't, the night is pitch black. She spent more than a year in a psychiatric hospital. And when I met her and we got together, she hadn't been out long. We had children almost at once. We both wanted them. I never thought about her having been ill. I wasn't frightened of it. My father died in a chair in his mother's house. The house was full of bottles. There was excrement on the sofa. His nose was broken and his face covered with blood. He was in the chair, dead, had been for more than a day, and during that time his mother was in the house. No one knows what she was doing. No one knows how Dad broke his nose or his face got covered with blood. I had written about how Dad died, and then Gunhard said I was lying. What did that make me? Lying about my father's death. I saw it from a distance. Him, Dad, dead in the chair. Broken nose, bloody face, surrounded by bottles. Grandma walking around. Is she making coffee? She had done that thousands of times. I knew exactly how she did it. And she, Grandma, who filled my chest with happiness whenever she paid us an unexpected visit. And I smelled her perfume down in the hall, is pouring coffee into a cup and lighting a cigarette. Gunhard didn't want this story to be told. I can understand that. But I can't understand him saying I lied. Saying I had made it all up to avenge my mother, whom my father had left 15 years earlier. I was so happy when they got divorced. I was so happy to get rid of him. I hated him, and I feared him, and I loved him. I went with Heidi and Jon to Voss, while Linda took Vanya to Oslo to visit Axel and Line. The idea was that Yngve and his children would look after mine, and I would be able to work. And then I would go to our cabin and finish the novel there. We had been at Yngve's for only a few hours when Linda rang. "Hi, it's me. My book's been accepted." "Really?" "Yes!" Linda called again that evening. She was still happy. It was as though the happiness was a wave washing through her. Everything was fantastic. I had a warning on the tip of my tongue. I wanted to tell her to take it easy, but I didn't have the heart. She should be allowed to be happy. And then we flew to Malmö. A couple of hours after we arrived home, the handle on the door started moving up and down. The door opened, and Vanya and Linda appeared. Vanya was full of her experiences she wanted to tell us about, so Linda and I sat eating at the table alone. She was on her way down. The joy had gone. Her energy had gone. I did hardly any writing up there, so I'll really have to go for it over the next few weeks. That's all right, isn't it? At least when Mom and Cecil come. But that's after you go to Iceland, isn't it? Do you have to go? Couldn't you cancel it? Are you crazy? I can't do that. And it's only 1 day. 1 day, Linda. I'm back the day after tomorrow. This is my job, after all. You have to respect that. I returned home late in the afternoon the next day. The children came running over as soon as they heard the door open. The trip had filled me with energy, so it was no effort brushing their teeth, a glass of water, reading a book, and resolving all the little squabbles. When at last they were in their beds and had reconciled themselves to the day being over, I went to Linda, who was on the balcony smoking in the darkness, wrapped up in the green parka I had once given her for her birthday. "Are you still going to the cabin tomorrow?" she asked. I nodded. "This is no good," she said. "Don't you understand? I can't manage." "Listen," I said, "I have 3 weeks to finish the novel. That's very little time. I can't, by which I mean I cannot, waste 2 more days. "But I'm scared, Karl Ove," she said, looking at me. "I can't be with them on my own. I don't know what might happen. I can't do this. It's dangerous." I woke up once in the night. She was awake, staring at the ceiling, as she had been when I came to bed. I turned over and fell asleep again. The next time I woke, it was morning. Linda was looking at me. "You can't go," she said. "No, I suppose I can't," I said, and sat up, put my feet into my jeans, and pulled them on. I had never seen Linda like that before. It was as if she were in a deep well and had to use all her strength to come to the surface, where the children were. There had been barely any life in her eyes. "I have an appointment with the doctor tomorrow," she said. Can you come with me, do you think? Of course I can, I said. It's awful, she whispered. She wanted me to help her go back into therapy. Most of all, she wanted us to go together. She had wanted that for many years. She knew I would rather die than go to couples therapy, and actually I meant it. If there were a choice between couples therapy and death, I would unhesitatingly choose death. But something about her desperate state made me call for an appointment with a psychologist the following day anyway. We'd been there earlier that spring. Linda had started crying when she explained how she felt. The psychologist listened to what she said, and then he asked me what I thought. And I told him. He wasn't so much interested in Linda's mood swings as her life situation. The fact that she didn't have a job and wasn't earning money. Do you think about suicide, Linda? About taking your own life? Linda stared at her. Then she burst into tears. But I can't, the children, I can't do that. You don't have the energy to do anything? No, Linda sobbed. Can you shower? Do you get out of bed at all? No, occasionally. The children, I can't manage. Then she looked at me. What's your perception of Linda now? She said. I don't quite know. You're obviously in a deep depression, the doctor said. We'll have to try to turn that around. One possibility is going to the hospital, of course. Then you'll have peace and quiet around you. At home you have the children and normal life. There might be demands on you it would be best you didn't face. I think she'd be better off at home, I said. Linda, the doctor said. I don't want to go to the hospital. I understand, the doctor said. Of course, you can be at home. It might be best for you. Could you manage to read to the children, for example? I don't know, Linda said. Then you can sit with them and watch children's TV for half an hour. She accompanied us to the door, smiled, said goodbye, and gently closed the door. Ingrid here. I'll open the door. How is she? She said, coming out of the elevator. We've just been to the doctor's. She said it was a deep depression. I was a few meters away from her and wanted the conversation to end. She was angry with me because of what I'd written about her in the second novel. Now there was this with her daughter. At the same time, she was dependent on me. I lived here and was the father of her grandchildren. as I was on her and the help she could offer. She looked at me. I thought you could sleep in the living room. When she was with us, she always cooked, did the shopping, and kept the kitchen clean. She stretched herself as thin as she could for us. Of that there was no doubt. If I hadn't written the book, everything in my relationship with her would have been good. But it lay there like a shadow, and we couldn't talk about it. The next morning I left for the office when Ingrid came to pick up Vanya at 8. Sat there until 3 writing the speech. Was back home by 3:30. I drank a glass of water in the kitchen, stared into the fridge for a while before taking out some margarine and a packet of ham. Took the bread from the cupboard next to it. As I was about to close the door, I glanced at the bottles on the top shelf. The bottles were not standing in their usual positions. The half-full bottle of aquavit from Christmas had changed places with the Calvados. The grappa that had been at the back was now to one side near the Dutch gin. I stood for a while rotating the various bottles in my hands, wondering what could have happened. The grappa had been almost full, hadn't it? Now it was right down by the label. I went in to Linda and sat on the toilet seat lid. Hi. I bought myself a bath bomb today. I can see, I said. There's something we have to talk about. Oh? It's your mother. Remember what I told you about how the levels in the bottles of booze were falling very noticeably lately? Mommy? Yes. She drinks when she's here with Vanya. She's been doing it all week, and I don't think there are any grounds for believing it's just started. I took a pencil, positioned myself on a chair in front of the cupboard, and marked all the bottles. A little dot on the labels, nothing more. So small that to see it you had to know it was there. I was behaving like the father of a teenager, and felt somewhat stupid standing there. Yet I couldn't see what else I could do. I didn't want the woman who was looking after my child, and the person who had most to do with her apart from Linda and me, to drink alcohol when she was with her. Ingrid opened the door and came into the hall, which was soon filled with her energetic, frenetic presence. There's something I have to say. Want to go for a walk with me? All right. Let's go right away, then. This won't take long. We went into the backyard, through the gateway and into David Bagara's gata. I didn't know how to articulate this. Well, I may as well blurt this straight out. I know you were drinking when you looked after Vanya today. Well, I simply can't tolerate that. It's no good. You can't do that. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had a drink while looking after Vanya. Never. Nor would it ever occur to me. Where have you got this idea from? Listen, I said. You're my mother-in-law. I wish you nothing but well. I don't want this, not at all. The last thing I want to do is to accuse you of anything. But what can I do when I know what happened? But you can't know, she said. I didn't do this. My stomach ached. I'd wandered into a kind of hell. You're a fantastic mother-in-law. You do more for Vanya, and you are more for Vanya than anyone else. and I'm incredibly happy about that, and I want this to continue. If you don't agree to put this behind you, you won't be able to meet her on your own. You'll never be alone with her. Do you understand what I'm saying? I can't confess to doing something I haven't done. Even though I feel like it, I can't do it. I suggest we drop it for a while, and then we can discuss it again and work out what to do. All right, she said, but it won't change anything, you know. Linda came into the hall after she had gone. How did it go? What did she say? She said she hadn't been drinking when she'd been with Vanya, and she couldn't understand how the levels in the bottle had gone down. If she's an alcoholic, denial is part of the whole picture. Perhaps, I said, but what the hell can we do? She just says, no, I didn't do it. Ingrid called Linda the next day and admitted everything. She added she didn't think it was that serious herself, but since we did, she would implement the necessary measures to ensure it would never be a problem for anyone again. She already had an appointment to see an alcohol therapist, and had decided to spend more time concentrating on herself and her own needs. I'm seriously worried about her, Karl Ove. It's as if she's suffering, but she doesn't know she is. She represses everything,